So I don't have anyone, and one day I was curious about and trying to think if my memory was correct as to if whether I had been to Perth or Brisbane on my first and second deployments or if I had flipped them. It's just been something I hadn't revisited or thought about in so long that I was curious. So I looked through one of my deployment books and I kind of went numb and was overwhelmed by how many memories and faces and events and emotions just flooded over me. And I wanted to cry, and I think it was like a mix of reminiscing and happiness and sadness, kind of all mixed together. But it had me thinking that, man, I could walk outside and get hit by a car or something, and my kids would never know any of these stories. I was thinking on if I die, who would talk of me? Who would remember these things or anything? Who actually took the time to get to know me? And the answer is not many people, and any who did are not really in my life anymore. So I'm going to be making these for my three girls. Just because no one wants to listen doesn't mean I'm not going to use my voice and make my stories heard. So while this isn't for you, if you listen and enjoy it, let me know below in the comment sections why. I would appreciate that. And this is all going to be hard, as when you're alone, you think a lot. And even when I wasn't alone, I thought in excess. So I think about all of the people who, for one reason or another, just have faded out of or from my life. Sometimes it was just life. Some of it was conscious decisions. And many I don't and will never know why. Others I do, but man, it's just literal nostalgia. So some of these will be up, some down, and others probably a mix mash of both. But in absence of anyone willing to listen, I'm now going to talk to my camera and myself. Cheers. I'm going to tell the first story of what is going to be a series in the epic of, it's hard to say, I'm going to say Miller. I'm not going to say his first name because he may hate me for some reason today. It's hard for me to say his rank because when he came to the unit I was in, he was first a corporal, and by the time I got out, he was, I believe, a staff sergeant, and then talking to him later, I believe he had gotten gunnery sergeant before getting out. But I have many stories about Miller, so I'm going to start. I feel awkward saying Miller, it's not right. But so I will say, then Corporal Miller came to my unit. I say it as if it was mine. I was a PFC at the time. And he had come from Okinawa, if I recall correctly. I'm almost positive because that's the. It'll make sense. But, excuse me. When he came to the unit, he was a hard nosed Okinawa Marine. For context, the way we just phrase it is in Okinawa, you basically have nothing else to do, so you just focus on doing everything by the book. And that's not totally true, but the point is it's a lot more rigid, structured, and formalized over there than many bases. And especially as at that time I was on the West Coast in California, that is one of the more lax places in the Marines. Now, most other branches would still say it's a terror camp, but um, in the microcosm of the Marines, it's pretty lax. On Camp Pendleton specific, I can't attest to every base in California. So coming there, he was a lot more rigid, and I wasn't, and we didn't mix well. For a little bit of context, I was kind of as you see now. I'm a white dude, but for again more context, back then I think my goal at one point was to get over, it was I think 180 pounds. All my time in the Marines, I ran, I want to say I got one 300 PFT in my life, but I was like a 280 PFT and all that, 280 290 for the most part. I think my lowest was a 270, but I was just more. He was a football player and wrestler, okay? So he was a lot wider than me, a lot stockier, a lot bigger, 300 PFTer. Dude was, as they say, built like a, brick crap house. And I don't mean that, I don't want to cuss, and I don't mean that derogatorily. But he was a big black Marine, or as we used to say, dark green. because we're all green, all one shade of green, but you got some that are darker and lighter than others. It was a way we'd say, hey, get Miller over there. Which one? A dark Marine over there. And so if, you'd know who we're talking about. But how did it come about? Um, I'll use that lesson for another day, but one thing I would do is say someone's rank detestfully if I didn't like them. So, let's say there's you and Corporal Miller. I'd be like, oh, good morning, Corporal you. Good morning, Corporal Miller. And one day he just looks at me and he's like, you got a problem with me, PFC ski? And I look at him and I'm like, yes, Corporal. He's like, you want to take this out to the tree line? Which again is just a term for us to go somewhere where no one can see it, and we're basically gonna fight, or as we say, PT, because I'll talk more about what happened. You don't generally fight, but we grapple, and it's the context is hilarious now that I'm telling this. Okay, so what we generally do, we'd go out and grapple, and one of us would beat the crap out of each other. Sometimes it would escalate to a fight. It didn't matter. You'd see what happened. For context, as I mentioned, based on my body size and his, I had no business doing that. I should have shut my mouth. For context more, my brother is 6'9", and I mentioned this previously a couple times, but I had this complex where if you were not as big and tall as my brother, it didn't register that you're still a lot bigger than me and I should shut my mouth. So I didn't register then. So I was like, yeah, let's go to the tree line, Corporal. We end up going out there, and I don't remember the exact order of things. It was by the smoke pit. I'm trying to close my eyes and remember because I don't smoke, but we waited for someone to leave, and that's generally where we knew we had a little bit of time. And we just start going at it, and I think it's a dirty wrestling move now that I'm putting it in context, but he brought his head up and headbutted me on the bottom of my chin, so I elbowed him. I won't say I elbowed him, but I elbow rubbed his face, which is a hockey move. And we're good. Next thing, he just has me, and it's. I want to say a good minute or two of me scrambling just to not get choked out or have him get my back. I'm just scrambling. And all of a sudden, oh my God, I have to tell the story of Sergeant Major Bullock one day now for the context here. But I'm not today. It'll be one of my next stories, Sergeant Major Bullock. I would need to look him up and see if he's still alive. Sadly, I don't know. He was an older gentleman, and I hope he is. But all of a sudden, we just hear Sergeant Major Bullock, Marines! We both hop up. And at this point, we have the potential to be in trouble. More so him because he's an NCO. Sergeant Major Bullock, without context, he's a very Marine. So he just looks at me. He says, what's going on here, Ski? And I look at Corporal Miller, and I look at Sergeant Major, and again, so the right answer is we're out here fighting, Sergeant Major, like two idiots. And I look at Sergeant Major Bullock, and I'm like, we're just PTing, Sergeant Major. He looks at Sergeant Miller, and again, his nose was bleeding from when I was rubbing his face with my elbow, and my lip or tooth was bleeding from my mouth. He looks at him and looks at me, nods appreciatively, and just carry on, Marines, and continues walking to where he was. And Corporal Miller, this is why I love the Marine Corps so much. At that, I don't remember if he said it at that moment or later, but he said two things. He's like, first and foremost, I respect you for even coming out here with me, because it should have. If I can find a picture and blur his face out, I'll show you. But I shouldn't have done it. And furthermore, I could have ratted him out or said he made me do this, Sergeant Major. I could have got us both in trouble. And he just said, it's like, that, good on you. You got the system, so to speak. He didn't say it like that, but that was the gist of what he was saying. You got it. And, man, I got to talk more about him sometime. Now I got to talk about Sergeant Major Bullock, too. But that's this story, this memory, and this moment. Thanks for spending this time with me. Girls, I love you. Take care. Bye.